Okay, so last February, it was the day of the Super Bowl, and my cousins called me and asked me to come out to San Diego and spend the day with them. So me and my cousins are all really close. Like, my family has a nice bond, and we're like best friends. But I don't get to really see them that much because they live in San Diego, so I automatically went, and I was so excited to get to spend the night with them. So I get there, and we go to my cousin Laura's friend's house, and it was, everyone's watching the Super Bowl. I don't really like football, so I was just eating, getting fat, what you do on those days. So we were there, and my cousin was getting pretty drunk, and she's 24, and I was 18 at the time. So we just kind of laughed it off, and we go back to my cousin's apartment, and she said she was going to spend the night at her friend's house. So me and my cousin Erica were watching movies that night, and it was about 2 o'clock, and we get a call from my uncle. And we didn't know why he was calling us that early in the morning and why he was awake, but he told us that we needed to get to the hospital as soon as we could. We just sat there and we're like, why would you do that to us? Like, when somebody tells you to come to the hospital but they don't tell you why, it's like all these ideas start running through your head, and you're thinking of the worst possible situation. So we get there, and at this time it's like 3 a.m. now, and we see my uncle waiting outside, and we ran up behind him, and he turns around, and you could tell something wasn't right. He looked scared, and you could tell that he had been crying. So we just kind of we were trying to hold back the tears and figure out what happened, and he tells us that my cousin Laura was hit by a car. We started blaming ourselves, thinking that if we would have stayed or if we would have taken her with us, this never would have happened, and we didn't really know how serious it was. All we wanted to do was get up there and see her and talk to her and just tell her how sorry we were that we weren't there. So we run up to the room, and as we're walking in, my uncle grabs our arm and was just like, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." But the look in his face, you could tell that he didn't even believe that. So we walk in, and we see my cousin, and it was the most unreal thing I've ever seen. We lost it right there. We were just a mess. We were crying for hours, and me and my cousin just sat there holding each other, not knowing if she was going to be okay. The doctors told us that they didn't even know if she was going to make it. She had fractured her skull. She had internal bleeding. She had drainage from her ears. She broke her pelvic bone, her ankles, her arms. She had stitches everywhere. She was just a mess. And they said if she did make it out, that she probably wouldn't remember who we were. And that just scared us to death. We sat there until probably 1 o'clock the next day, just crying and holding her hand and trying to get her to hear us and talking to her. So that night I had to go home, and I had school the next day. But I knew during that week we would come out to visit a lot, so kind of made me feel a little better. But the next time we all went out, we brought our entire family, uncles, aunts, cousins, and we would sit around and pray for her and tell her that she was going to be okay. We would decorate her room and put all her favorite things around, try to make her realize that we were there. After about a month, she was still in a coma. And by this time, we didn't really know what was going to happen. We didn't know how she'd make it out, and if she did, if she'd know who we were. So after, it was about the beginning of March now, the last week, and we get a call from my uncle, and he says, "Laura opened her eyes today." And the shock that we all felt and the happiness that she was awake just was unreal, and it was the best feeling we've ever had, knowing that she was coming back. But she had this blank stare in her face, and she really didn't know who we were. And so we went out there as soon as we could to visit her, and we went up to the room that she was originally in, and she wasn't there. They told us that she would be in recovery room. We go in there, and she looked like she was completely fine. It was the most shocking most biggest miracle we've ever experienced. She was healed. Like they told her she'd be out within a couple weeks, and it was just unbelievable to go from 0 to 100 in that short of time. And she's now out, and she was better in a month, back to work, and it was the best and scariest month of my life.